Welcome back, sewists. We're going to start cutting out our Tasha coat today. This pattern is from Subversive Femme. They have quite a few really cool vintage patterns, a lot of knitting patterns also. I will have it linked below if you want to find the pattern. I got mine off of Etsy. It's a PDF. If you want to know about the pattern alterations and all of that, that's last week's video. It will also be linked down in the description because I did have to alter. It only comes in one size from them, and it is a 38 bust, which is too small for me. So I showed that last week. Today we're going to cut out all of the pieces, and there's a lot going on because I'm going to be doing some companion fabrics and some things like that. First, you can make the cute shirt I'm wearing. It will be linked below if you'd like to sew this one up too. So for today, for cutting out, I have all of my pieces all altered and ready to go. I'm going to give you some close-ups now of the pattern pieces because this is a vintage pattern. It didn't have like a separate lining pattern, that sort of thing, and you may want to trace off your pattern for lining separately. It just has a few little diamonds, and you're supposed to kind of cut around the diamonds, and in the instructions it shows the lining very jagged looking around the edges. I went in and marked my seam allowances and made a definite line so I know where to fold back for the lining. The only place that's going to be an issue is in the back neck because it's so curvy, so we'll see how I have to fudge it. You don't want your lining to be too small. Lining should always be kind of on the large side. It will actually pull the outer fabric and distort your fit, so you want to have a little extra in the lining. A lot of times in a nice jacket or anything like that, you'll notice your lining actually has a pleat in the back for extra fullness. There's a reason for that. It'll have more gathers in the sleeve. So I'm going to make sure my lining isn't too small. I would rather have a little extra in there. For pulling in and out, you're much less likely to get fraying and holes from it being too tight and it pulls against that lining. I'm going to be cautious of that. So we have got our beautiful plum wool. I'm so in love with this fabric, this color. I have got my interfacing. I have got my lovely velvet that I'm going to be doing the cuff, the facings out of, and I am going to do the welt, I think, out of this also. So this is going to have to be interfaced. We'll talk about interfacing and ironing velvet here in a minute. And then I have my pretty satin lining. So these are the pieces we're going to be cutting out of. For the coat itself, we're just going to be cutting 2 fronts and 2 backs. Pretty straightforward. Then we're going to be cutting our facing and our welts out of interfacing and out of the velvet. And then we'll have our lining pieces, which will be 2 fronts and 2 backs of lining, and our pocket pieces will also be out of lining. Now this is a project I'm not going to be using my serger on, other than I am going to just finish all of my lining pieces on the serger because you can just see how it frays. So that's going to be one of my prep things. I'm just going to serge those very outer edges. This pattern has 1/2 inch seam allowance. So if you like a wider seam allowance, you may want to go in and add that when you're doing your pattern work anyway. Give yourself a wider seam allowance. Usually designer clothes and nicer clothes have wide seam allowances. 1 inch is pretty common. That gives you room for alteration if you ever need it. Since you're custom sewing for yourself, you may not need it, but I'm giving you the heads up. Here's the sleeve. Pardon my shadow. And you can see I have a line here and it says cut for lining. The directions actually show you going around these little diamond shapes to do it. I've got this little fold line. I'm actually going to make it a little deeper because I want to have a little give on that sleeve, but I needed something to give me a basics where to fold back. I'll probably actually end up folding more towards the middle of that line. Now on the front where the facing is going to go, so the facing goes right here, and I'm pretty much just cutting off right along that line right here where it says cut for lining. So that's what I'm going to do for the front, and then again the sleeve the same way. Don't need quite as much for the lining for that. And that's it. Got to decide which side I want to be my right side. I can't fold this in half and cut 2 because the pattern is too wide. So we have got to be very smart about our cutting so we don't end up with 2 lefts or 2 rights of either piece. Sometimes you can fold it up so you're selvage to selvage and cut it that way and get all of your pieces. However, if you have nap, you cannot. Now, if you have a nap, you can't flip your patterns like so. if you flip them like this, you're going to have, like, you could never do this with velvet or corduroy. You can't flip it. Okay. Not gonna chance it. Not gonna get it cut out and find out, oh, it is slightly different. So we are going to cut the first time with the pattern right side up and the second time with the pattern flipped over. And by doing that, it prevents us from accidentally cutting two rights or two lefts. It would fit better if I flipped them, but I know my nap will be not as happy. So I do not want that to happen. So I'm going to be careful about not flipping this. I'm also noticing as I'm looking at this, which I noticed when I was doing my pattern work, the back sleeve is much wider than the front sleeve, which makes sense. A lot of times it's that way. Okay, so you can see how I've got them laid. This is the pattern pieces right side up. So when I come back, I'm just gonna keep my nap going the same direction, but I'm gonna flip the pattern pieces over, and that will make sure that I get mirrored pattern pieces or rights and lefts. I'm also going to put a little pin on the right side so that I can keep track of that when I'm sewing, so I don't end up accidentally, because they are very close, but in the wearing you will notice a difference. I don't know if you can tell it. It's probably not going to show on the camera. When I was laying them this way, it was quite obvious the difference, but it doesn't show on the camera nearly as much as it does in person. But that's when people will be seeing us. Okay, so this is how I'm going to cut. Step one. Slide it down and do it again. Let me get these cut out and I'll show you. It's gonna be a little hard to see because I've got the pattern flipped over, just making sure that I get it laid properly so I don't end up with two right fronts. So I have laid them down, making sure I've got everything lined up. I'm going to cut the second one, make sure my grain lines are right. But look, I have lots of fabric left over. I'm so happy about it. When I bought this fabric, I knew I wanted to make a coat. I knew I wanted to make it in this, and I bought quite a bit extra as insurance. I also knew I wanted to make a hat. There's actually enough. I probably could get a skirt. I won't. I don't know. Sure would make a nice skirt. I might make a skirt, but I definitely am going to do a hat. A hat out of this would be so cute. It would also make a gorgeous vest. This is just so lovely. Okay, well, I'm going to get this other one cut. You can see here's my front, which was over there, has been flipped over and now is on this side, and here's my back. So I've got plenty. All right, I'm going to get these second ones cut out, and then we're going to come back and work on lining, interfacing, and velvet. Okay, I have my fronts, I have my main fabrics cut out, and I'm going to move on to doing my facings and my welt piece, and I'm going to do those out of velvet. And velvet is a nap fabric. I don't know if you've never worked much with velvet, you have to decide which way you want it to look. So I'm going to just hold this up. Can you see how that looks? Now if I hold it up from the other direction, one side looks very light and one side looks very dark. It's quite plum looking. It looks quite dark. Yeah, this side's very, very dark. Okay, so this is what I want to be the top of my fabrics. When I fold my cuff up, etc., I want it to look light and not dark. Now it's folded back and it's on moving body, so it's not going to be perfect. But if you end up making a whole coat out of velvet and you flip them, you're going to have one side that looks really dark. They're going to look like completely different fabrics. It can look intentional and it can look like you made a mistake. So I'm going to be cautious of that. Let me see if I turn it. Can you see how red that looks? That's nap. See how it turns into looking red? Look at how different that looks than that. We're going to cut all of these pieces have to be interfaced. So I need 2 front facings, 2 back facings. That's a pocket. That's a pocket. Those are lining. My welt pieces need 2 of those, and I need 2 sleeve facings. So these are the pieces I need out of my velvet. This is my interfacing. It is a fusible. It's very soft and flexible, but also has really good structure. So this is the right side. You can see it's black and nappy. The wrong side it's knitted, and it does have the glue dots. It's kind of hard to feel it, but it's there. So this is what I bought for my interfacing. There's a lot of interfacing options you could use. I went with black because I'm using a dark fabric. You do need a shoulder pad for this. If you're a person that always skips shoulder pads, let me say something to you. Shoulder pads do 2 things. They balance the figure. So if you're bottom heavy or if you're really curvy, a shoulder pad will give you balance. So it will make the shoulder and the hip look more in line with each other. The other thing it does is it makes the garment hang. So if you have a garment that was meant to have a shoulder pad and you don't put it in there, it's not going to hang right on you anymore. It was built in with that shoulder pad, unless you have an extremely square, broad shoulder. If you're built like a linebacker, you may not need a shoulder pad. Good for you, you got built-in body shoulder pads. But for the rest of us, even though I am broad-shouldered, a shoulder pad adds so much. Now you may need to adjust it a little bit. I'm quite broad-shouldered, so and I'm kind of even square-shouldered. Not perfectly, but you can see there's quite a bit of shoulder there, but I'm even bigger in the hip, so I don't want to miss out on that shoulder pad. You can buy dolman shoulder pads, which means the end of the shoulder pad curves, which is meant for jackets like this. I could not find a dolman shoulder pad anywhere. And you can see it's not super big, super tall. I could stack them though. One of the reasons I like these is they're stackable, and it's just enough to give a little bit to that shoulder. And you can move that shoulder pad in and out a little bit also to balance the body. This is what they do in all the men's coats. Every men's coat has a shoulder pad in it, and it gives men the effect of a nice chest and shoulder. And it's because they have these nice big, that's what these are. These are men's tailoring shoulder pads. When you look at how it fills in that whole shoulder. So if you're hollow shouldered or anything, it's going to fill it in and make it look better. Don't skip your shoulder pads. Okay, enough of that tangent. Sleeve facing, welt pieces, front facing, back facing. So you can see that's it out of my 1 yard of velvet. You can really see the directional. If I come over here, look how different it looks. That's such a fun thing about velvet. You can also see it's this right here is like from the fold. So you can see how it's made an impression, which is what I skipped. Made sure to skip it. Now I'm sure I could probably just press that out, but I just skipped it. I'm going to use this big sheet here, will be my pressing cloth, and then I can use it for something else if I want to. Like maybe it can be on one of those hats when I go to work on hats later. All right, I'm moving on to interfacing. I am laying it with the right side in and the glue side up. The reason I'm doing that is this side it sticks to itself like crazy. Like this little nappy side just really sticks. It's like Velcro. It just wants to stick together. So it's just a little easier to work with that way. On these velvet pieces, I went in and marked when I was taking my pattern piece off, what was the top, because this is just a rectangle. So I made sure and marked my top on that. I'm going to do the same thing on my welt pieces. These, it's easy to tell because of the shape, but on these that are just rectangles, I need to make sure and mark it so that I don't get my fabric upside down when I'm putting everything together. So I'm going to lay this out. These are going to get laid out exactly like I just laid out the other. I may move this in here instead of on the edge. It actually goes that way. And then we will move on to lining. All right, here's the interfacings laid out and ready to go. I'm going to press everything and transfer markings. I need to transfer markings on these before I cut out my lining. So I'm going to, after I get the interfacing cut out, I'm going to pause, do some marking transfer, and then we'll come back and do lining. I am taking my pins through all the places that I need to mark. This is my right side, so I have got my wrong sides to each other. And the reason I've done that, I'm going to turn this towards the dart here. So here's my little dart. and I poke my pin through all the layers, straight up and down as best I can. Sometimes I even get it on the hinge of the table so I can poke it farther down so that I can open this up and you can see the pin coming through both layers, and then I can mark right at that pin. And I'm going to mark, I'm on the wrong side of the fabric, which is the side I will be sewing my dart in. Now you can also do thread based if you want to, like a hand basting. I seldom do that. This is, if I were going to, this would be the project I'd do it on. So I've done my first part of my dart, pull out those pins, and then come to the next pins. And there you can see where those markings are. I hope you can see it. And then come, oh, I just pulled my pin out. Got to poke it in nice and deep. There we go. And I'm marking right where the pin goes through. So it's a pretty small mark, just enough to be seen. I like to be pretty accurate with this. And I'm going to do this for the dart and for the welt. Now, pull out those. And I'm going to come down. This is my dart point. And I'm marking right at the pin. So can you see my marks? The wrong side later on. Okay, now I'm going to come and do the same thing for the welts down here to get my welt markings. And I will have transferred my markings and we can come on and do our linings. Now that I'm moving on to lining, one of the things that I've noticed, I have 60-inch wide satin lining. Because I have folded back the sleeve where the cuff is going to be attached, it now fits on my fabric folded, so I'm not going to have to cut it twice. On the back neck where the facing is going to go, I'm just going to cut it the whole thing, and then I'll come back and trim away that little bit of extra at the top. I just think it's easiest. I'm leaving in the full length of the hem at the bottom. I can always take that out. Normally, you have them extra across the shoulders in the back, so I'm actually going to be cutting this a little fuller. I'll show you some close-ups of how I'm going to do that. I'm going to just take my chalk and draw that onto the wrong side of this fabric before I cut, so you can see how I'm doing that, because I think it's better to have extra ease across the shoulder in your satin. You're much less likely to end up with your lining fraying out and coming apart. I have a leather coat like that right now where the center back is all coming apart, and they did not build in the ease in the lining in that nice leather coat. I have to go and repair my leather coat. So let me show you how I'm doing it. You can you see this line right here? So here is the back with a 1/2 inch seam allowance included. I have come out a full inch from that down the entire back. You can see how I just cut up here at the top. I'm going to make that into a pleat and press it in, so it'll be pleated down the back all the way to the hem, and then it'll go back to being narrow inside that hem. I've given myself extra. I can come back and trim this out when I'm in the actual attaching and folding up the hem and that sort of thing. I want to make sure I have the fullness. It's going to wear better. It's going to fit better. We're not going to have any problems with pulls. So I'm going to cut it. I am going to go ahead and just cut this neck shape out. We'll address this when we're ready to add the facing and do all of that. So I'm not even going to worry about this. Just going to cut it the way it is. I could have made a second lining pattern piece, and I didn't. So this is how we're trimming. You can see where it's folded up there. I gave myself a little extra. Again, I'd rather have a little fullness in that sleeve where the cuff folds back than have it be pulled tight, where it pulls against your elbow on the inside. Don't forget to cut out your pocket pieces out of your lining. So I have this little scrap up here that was under the sleeve. So I'm going to get my pockets cut out, and then I'm going to roll up and get my front cut out, and we will be completely finished with the cutting. All cut out. I have my stack of fabric here, and I've got all of this stuff to be pressed behind me. So we're going to go straight over to the ironing board, and we're going to press on interfacing on everything. I forgot to mention, when we're cutting out that little rectangle welt pocket piece, this little piece right here for the welt pocket, we need 4 of them. You need one that's going to be on the piece that becomes the actual welts, and we have a double welt pocket in this case. You could do it as a single if you wanted to. But we also need one to go on the coat itself to stabilize it, because we're cutting a hole in this and flipping it through. So having an interfacing there is a really good idea to help stabilize it. Now I have a nice heavy coat, so when I press this on, there will be no demarcation from the edge of the interfacing to the coat. If you're using a lighter weight fabric, you may want to maybe pink this edge, do something to give an indefinite edge line on your interfacing piece that you're going to be fusing to the coat. You can also use a sew-in, but a fusible really helps with the stabilization and the fraying. You may, especially if you have a fabric that likes to fray. This one is so stable. It is a knit, but it's almost a belted knit, nice and stable. So I'm not really worried about that at all. So we're gonna go over and start fusing over at the ironing board. First thing I've done is I've laid out my scrap of my velvet, because I'm going to be fusing to velvet. So here is my back neck facing. I'm going to lay that face down onto the velvet, and then I can get my piece that I'm going to fuse to it like this, and then I can press. Now normally when I do interfacing, I use my little Teflon sheets like this, because it prevents any little, if there's anything that hangs over, from fusing to the ironing board. So I'm going to have to watch. I don't want to fuse anything to this velvet either, because I'm going to be using it again and again as my pressing cloth to prevent iron demarcation. I could lay one of these on this side of it if I wanted to prevent anything from coming up this direction, but this is how we're going to do it. Let me turn on my iron. Now, this is synthetic, so I want to not use too hot of an iron on this. On the wool, I can go really hot. All I'm going to do is get all of these pressed on. They're nice and stable. I don't want to demark this either, because I want to keep using it and I don't want to transfer that over. I did a velvet stole or wrap where I intentionally demarked it, and where I did like embossing. I'll put that below if you're interested in seeing how that works, because there are some fun things you can do. I think I'm going to do this just to protect it. And remember, you don't want to rub back and forth. You want to just press straight down. And you can see even the iron mark on this. You can imagine what that could do to your nappy velvet below. If you don't have a big piece for your velvet or corduroy or whatever, use a nice nappy towel. And you can see how it sort of stuck to the Teflon. That's what makes that Teflon nice, is it protects, it didn't stick to my iron. I'm looking to see if I got it stuck good. I'm gonna have to do a couple more passes. I've totally missed this corner over here. So this is all I'm going to do. Don't steam if you have the Teflon on top, because it won't go through, or silicone. I forget what it's made out of, but you don't need to steam if you're using it on top of your iron, because it can't permeate. It'll just steam back up onto the iron, but not go through. So I'm going to just do this, and then I let it sit and cool before I go on to the next piece. So this is sort of a long process, but by doing it this way, and see, there's no demarcation on either piece, on my velvets, on any of my velvets. So I'm going to just pull that off. Okay, this out here did not get stuck. And then see, I didn't make any demarcation on either side. Still looks great. This is the inside fronts of my coat. I've got my extra interfacings here, and I've transferred the markings to the interfacing. I've also got them on the coat. And you can see I'm going to line them up exactly on top of each other and press them. And if you need to, stick a pin in it to get them exactly lined up, so that we don't end up with one pocket higher than the other. And we're just going to press this on. I'm going to give it a light press real quick just to get it set, and then I'm going to put my sheet on top and give it a heavier press. Because this is a wool, it can take the heat and it can take the steam. I'm going to give a little steam in here too, but not on top of this. I've got to make sure they're not on top of each other when I steam anything like that. I want to make sure that they're flat, because we don't want to demarcate our beautiful, beautiful fabric. You can kind of see the colors better when I close it up like that. Okay, so we're going to press these on wrong side. These are on the wrong side of the fabric. This is just extra stabilization. We're ready to do the pocket, and we're finally close to getting to sew. Whew, okay, it is 2:21. So I started this at about 10:30 this morning. I've been up here a long time. I have not sewn a stitch, but everything is prepped. I am tired, however. So this is what I'm trying to decide. often do not do anything that takes precision, complication, or lots of brain cells when I'm starting to feel tired, because that's when I make mistakes. So I'm going to do my welt pocket in the morning. It'll be just like this for you. But what I can do is I'm going to serge all my lining pieces just around the outer edges so that they don't fray. I'm going to go ahead and get all of that serged today, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the dart. So I'm going to go ahead and put my darts in because that's an easy thing to do, and I can put those in and get them pressed, and I can do all of my, I'm tired enough that I'm losing words. I'm going to do all of my lining outer edges so that my lining's not fraying and leaving little pieces everywhere when I'm working on it. When you see me next after the dart, I'm going to look different because it'll be the next day. We'll do welt pocket tomorrow, and then that's where we're going to stop for this video. We'll come back next week and we're going to finish putting all the rest of it together. It'll go actually really fast, but I think because the welt pocket has so much going on with it, it should just be sort of it should sort of have its own space, and then we will do the rest of the coat next time. So this is going to be a three-parter. I have decided. I kind of thought so last week when I was working on the pattern, and it's for sure. So let's put in that dart. If you struggle with darts, go ahead and use your chalk and a ruler and draw your dart legs right on there, and then you will not have any problem. Where did I put I moved my chalk all the way across the room. I did buy a companion fabric to make a dress to go with this. We'll see if it happens before winter's over. But I'm going to go ahead and just use my chalk and draw my dart legs. You don't have to do this, but it sure does kind of make your life easy. If you get kind of wonky little darts, just draw your dart legs on. Quick close-up of how it looks when you draw your legs on with chalk. Sure makes it easy to see. There's my pocket pieces all ready to go and marked. And then through my next marking, all of this is on the wrong side. It's just a good thing. Okay. Here you can see the dart legs, and I've just got the pin going straight through right now. And what I do is this one that's going to be the very end. That helps you know where to start and stop. This one is in the middle. Now when you have a fabric as deep as this, if you turn and go like this, you can actually offset your dart a little bit, so I'm being really careful. You might want to actually go this way. I normally don't do that, but because of the depth of the fabric, it might be worth it. Now my stitch length is a 3. See how easy it is to follow that line though. Let's look at this. All right, so here you are on the wrong side. I haven't pressed it over yet. It will press towards the, so here's the inside. It's going to press that way. So that's the pretty dart. And here's my tails. I'm going to tie these tails, and I'm going to leave a little bit on the inside. And I'm going to give this a gentle press. When pressing darts like this, I will press it like this first. So we're going to press it like this to make this edge nice and flat. Then I will open it up and I will press along the stitching line, but not along this fold line. You can press this edge if you press hard enough, and or depending on your fabric, if your fabric is delicate enough, you can press that edge into and demarcate the outside of your fabric. So we want to be careful about that. And the same on this side. I will give it a gentle press with some steam on this side, but look at how pretty that dart's going to look. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do the other one. There we are. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the other dart. Just another view of the dart where you can see me going straight down the leg. It's pretty easy to line that up right down the center. And stitch. This fabric sews like a dream. just going to serge all the way around these lining pieces. Probably give them a little press too, just so we don't have any fray issues. I'm just going on the outer edge. All right, we're back. Today's shirt is this, I think it's called My Favorite Raglan Tee. I have two videos on it, one where I draft it off of a ready-to-wear and the other where I sew it up. But I have a bunch of Raglan Tee projects if you're interested in making something cute like this. I wear these all the time. When I'm at home sewing, I'm usually dressed pretty comfy like this. Okay, we're gonna start on our welt pocket now. Let me take you over to the cutting table real quick and show you where we're at. All right, I'm just going to show you all the things that I got accomplished before we start on the welt pocket. I've just searched around all my lining pieces. I've got everything fused. Pocket pieces fused in the beginnings of the markings. So that's what we're going to start on now. There you can see it. So we're going to work on these pockets. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our welt pieces. Mine are the velvet. And we're going to complete these little markings. So currently I just have where the dots are, and from reading the directions this should be about 1 inch apart, which they are. So I want to make sure that I'm going to make a 1 inch rectangle. So it's going to be 1 inch wide, and you want something pretty fine to mark this with. I'm using my chalk, and it'll be easier if you're using white interfacing, whereas I've got my dark interfacing, so I'm using light chalk. Now my ruler is 1 inch wide, so it makes it real easy for me to mark this 1 inch all the way around. This is very important. This is going to do a couple things, including make sure our welt is nice and straight. But the other thing I need to do is get this line down here. We're going to cut down the middle of this and flip it around. And the depth of this cut is going to become the little lips or the welts of our pocket. So I want to make sure that's nice and straight. So I'm going to use my ruler again, and I'm going to mark this right at the 1/2 inch. I'm going to double check everything's straight. If I find that I'm off, I switch chalk color. And I'm not. Okay, so there's one. I'm going to do that for both. You can see how that looks. So let's get both of these marked. Okay, so here are my pieces. You can see I've got all of my markings transferred. There are 2 notches on the top of the pocket and 1 notch on the bottom. That's to help us later when we put our pocket pieces on, because there's a large pocket piece that hangs down from the top and a short one that hangs from the bottom. So now we're going to take this to our coat. We're going to line everything up. This is the right side of my coat. So there's nothing going on there. And the right side of my little welt piece. On the wrong side of my coat, you can see I've got my markings and my interfacing. And what I'm doing, I'm going to turn my ring around so it'll quit. There we go. I am poking through the corner of my welt piece, and I am lining it up with the piece on the back so that I get my pockets nice and straight. So that's what I'm starting with. I'm just going to make sure that the pocket is straight. A couple more pins. We're going to make sure we get all of our corners lined up. And now I can poke through and find that corner. And now that corner's lined up. So we're going to line up all of our corners. And when I get it lined up, I'm going to put a couple pins way out here on the side. You could hand baste, which a lot of people do because you don't want this moving at all. I'm going to put a few pins way out here. Now I'm working in a fabric that when I pin it, it does not leave any holes. If you have a fabric that doesn't heal well, you may not want to pin out like this, but on a nice heavy wool, it works great. So I'm going to do this for both pocket pieces and get them lined up lovely and perfect. One of the things I'm going to do is once I get both of them lined up, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm just going to measure and make sure that these corners here are the same distance apart on both pieces so that my pockets are perfectly even, and then we'll be ready to sew. So I've got them both pinned on. What I did is I measured to make sure they're both 5.5 from this corner to the front, that they're exactly the same from this corner to the bottom. That's what I did, so they all line up. Everything is happy. Now when I go to my sewing machine, which is what we're going to do next, I have my straight stitch foot on. I'm going to be using my even stitch foot, or like a walking foot, and I'm going to be using a shorter stitch length. You want a short stitch length because when we are sewing this, we're going to be cutting this open and coming right to this corner, and a short stitch length is going to give us more stability. I often sew with a 3, but I'm going to do a 2.5 for this. This is one of those that you're not going to want to rip out, so you want to do it right the first time. So I am not starting at a corner. I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to sew a round pivot on each corner and then cross my stitches in the middle. What that does is it makes my corners stronger. So I want to always start on one of these long ends rather than on a corner. My markings are going right down the middle of my foot. I'm using a straight stitch foot. I'm not back stitching because I'm going to cross it when I come back around. So as I come to this corner, I'm going to sink it, rotate, sink it. Making sure I'm lined up exactly. Sink it. Now here's where I started stitching. Now I've crossed my stitches. That's how it looks on the right side, and that's how it looks on the wrong side. Not much to see. All right, now that that's done, we're going to cut this open. To cut it open, you don't want to cut all the way to this end. We're actually going to make a V. We're going to cut it like this. You want these little V's. That's going to help us make those ends. So to cut through, now I've got 2 layers of fabric and 2 layers of interfacing. I've got a medium weight wool and a velvet. So there's a lot here. I'm going to lay these on top of each other, and I'm just going to kind of start in the middle. Pardon the noise of the scissor. I want to keep this as straight as I can, so I'm going to make a pretty tiny little snip. May need to get a heavier scissor. Okay, I'm going to cut through my layers independently to start so I can get through to the wool. There we go. Now that I've got a little hole, I can come through with my nice sharp applique scissors. Make sure you're only cutting through your 2 layers, nice and straight, right on those lines. And we're doing the thing where we cut up to but not through on our corners here. Can you see how that's looking? I flip it over and do this side. All right. Now it's important to keep this nice and straight so you can see my stitching is good and straight. This is all going to flip around to the inside. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And we are going to press this. We're going to be really careful because we've got velvet on here, so you can see how that flips around. And when we're flipping, we're going to make sure that we've got nice corners. We're going to check all of that out. Let me go to the wrong side here. So on the wrong side, all of this gets flipped around. So we're going to come to this corner, these ends, and we're going to make that nice and tight and straight. If you need to, put a hand tack in it. I'm going to put a pin in it to hold it nice and straight on each end. Make sure our corners look good. I love the way this velvet looks with this wool. Man, that's pretty. Not mad at that at all. Okay, so I've got both of these corners just kind of held down. Now, here's our like our seam allowance from our where we cut it open. We're going to leave that, let that just lay flat, and we're going to pull this nice and tight against it, but we're not going to fold it down. And by doing that, we've created one of our welts, one of the lips, if you want to think of it that way. And we're going to put a couple pins to hold this. Now I'm going to do a little stitching here by hand, most likely. So we're going to do that. Now I'm going to move these pins because their heads are in the way. I'm going to face them like this for now. Get these little corners. There we are. Now I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Fold that up, and by doing it like this, it should sort of self-regulate. And it also fills in that welt pretty nicely so that we have got a double welt, which is a welt with two lips. So I'm just going to flip this around so you can see how it's starting to look. Now I have nothing stitched, it's all just pinned in, but you can see how my welt is looking. That's so pretty. So on the coat, when the coat is like this, that's the little welt that's going to hide. Now what I don't want, you can see a little bit of velvet peeking through here, so I'm going to make sure, pull that nice and tight when we're ready to stitch so that goes away. I want to make sure these welts line up perfectly, but don't overlap, and we don't want a hole. So what I often will do is I will stitch this shut, which is what I'm going to do now. You can, depending on your fabric, you could zigzag down that. You can take a couple hand stitches. I always hold those two welts shut because it's going to make everything lay flat and nice. You're going to have less of a problem, and I'm just going to make sure all of my little ends look good. So I'm going to get both of my pockets, this one I haven't done yet, to this point, and then I'll come back and show you the next step. So give me 1 second. All right, so here's pocket one, and I've just stitched my little welt shut. I'm going to do the same thing here. Just trying to keep everything nice and neat. I'm mainly just worried about the middle of the pocket, keeping it flat. I'm going to come in and fix these corners next. So we just want to get it as close as we can so that our little pocket welts don't move too much. I've got a double thread here, no knot, and I'm just doing a wide loop, just temporary. And I am using an opposing color just to make it easy to see. I'm just making sure my welts meet and don't overlap, and I don't have gaps. Let's go fix our ends now that these are stitched to each other. All right, so now that we've done that, we're going to come back underneath here to these ends where we have got the little triangle and all of this excess. And what we want to do is we want to make everything line up nice and tight. And I'm going to pull this triangle and all of this out. I'm going to stitch across here to make it nice and flat. So let's flip this over. And what our goal is to make sure that we don't have any peek through of our welt piece to the outside. And we're going to stitch as close as we can to our coat. So let's flip this over, head to the sewing machine here. I am pulling the welt pieces so that they are not tucked in. And I always do, some people don't do this corner at all, and some people do it afterwards, like they stitch the top and the bottom of the welt first. But I find that you end up with imperfect corners if you do that. So I'm going to do one quick stitch and check it. I'm not even going to back stitch yet. Just across there. And we're going to look at it. And I've got, look at my little buckles. That's what we don't want. That's what I'm worried about. So the reason we have buckles like that is that I did not pull this little area tight, which is why I did not back stitch and I did short stitch. See how easy it is to pull that back out? So I can fix that. So let's look over here on this side again. All right, we're going to tuck in. Now sometimes the reason this doesn't lay nice is because we didn't cut our corners deep enough. But I don't think that's the case here. I think it's just a fold issue. Yeah, see that corner's already looking a lot better. I hope you can see it. I know it's hard in this light. Between the light and the dark fabric. It's raining outside today, so we don't have as much natural light. I film in front of the window to help take care of that. Okay, I'm going to stick a pin this way. Now we're going to do this corner. All right, okay, that one looks great. This one's ready for stitching. This one moved on me again. Part of the issue is because I chose to do my velvet too, because velvet, we all know, velvet's a little creepy crawly. Yeah, okay. Stick a pin in. I'm sticking a pin. I hope it shows. I'm sticking a pin into that seam to hold it down, both sides. Okay, now I'm going to come back. Now that that's pulled nice and tight, and we're going to stitch it again, just like I did before. Watch those, the pins are hiding underneath. I just stabbed myself. Hold that back. We're going to do our best to get this corner nice and tight and pretty. That's a lot better. Okay, so I'm going to do that for all my corners. So there's that side. So we're going to come in and do all of our little corners like that. We're just going to make sure that we can get to, whoops, there we go. I'm going to pull this nice and tight. We're going to go across that little V on all four corners. Once that's done, you can see how pretty that's looking. We're going to come back and we're going to stitch in this ditch on each side, and this part will be done and we'll be ready to add the pocket to it. Okay, I'm going to do my four corners and we'll come back and stitch in the ditch. All right, friends, we have got our little ends stitched. What I did is I went back, I did my original, make sure I like it, and then I did a good securing one where I stitched across and back stitch. So it's in there. That end is nice and tight. We're going to now come in. I have pulled these as tight as I can and as even, and we're going to stitch in the ditch. And I am literally stitching right here. So I want it to be as invisible as possible. Try to get my camera up close. And I've got a pretty small stitch again. I am sinking right in that corner. I'm just going to do one stitch and go back. And I'm really looking at where the needle is. at the other corner. So there is one stitched in the ditch. You cannot even see it. It just disappears. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to go down this side and do the other one. And this welt will be done, and we can then add our pocket pieces to it. All right, so this is the wrong side of the pocket, and this is where I stitched in the ditch. I know that velvet kind of just makes it all disappear. Here's the right side. Isn't that going to be cute? Okay, so now we're ready to actually add our little pocket pieces. So we've got two kinds of pocket pieces here. We have a long one, and the main thing we have to make sure is we get the pocket going the right direction. So if you see this shape, so I've got satin, so this is my right side. So the long pocket will be on top, and the short one, make sure I get them going the right direction, will be on the bottom. They're going to go like this, and they're going to sew together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bottom one first, going to line it up like this, and I'm just going to stitch across here and then press it down. I'm going to stitch this one up here across in that little seam allowance, and then we'll be ready to stitch around the pocket. All right, so I have pinned on, or I've clipped on, in this excess here of the little welt piece, my bottom pocket. I'm just going to bring it over here to the sewing machine. It's a little tight. You could use a, my little straight stitch foot works great, or you could even use a zipper foot if you needed to get in there. I'm doing a kind of narrow stitch, about 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to go ahead and lengthen my stitch now that I'm not going around the welt. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing to the top. Take my pocket piece, we're going to clip it on, and stitch it down across the top of the welt. Now I'm going to say, while I'm sewing this in, a quick shout out to Wobbly Biped, who last week when I was showing all of this and my thoughts on the pocket, they mentioned how luxurious it would be to have the inside of the pocket be velvet. It would be like little hand warmers, and I did not do it just because I didn't want the extra bulk in here on the hip, but I am telling you that was a superb idea. I may regret that I didn't take up their idea and do that, but I thought that was really great. I probably won't use my pockets a lot, but I thought that was super smart. Okay, so now here's our pocket. I can just open this up. I'm gonna, again, clip it. We're gonna go ahead and sew all the way around this outer part of the pocket, and I'm gonna clip it, catching all of these pieces in here. So I'm gonna put quite a few clips to make sure it doesn't slide around. And of course, I've got satin on top of that, so you need to clip or pin. And if you're real picky, you could change your thread color, but I'm just going to stitch all of this in the plum color. All right, now we're going to do the same thing on this side. You can see how that is. So we're going to clip this together. All right, so I am going to try and do this one-handed. which is not my favorite way of doing it, but we are so close to the finish line here, so. Sorry, that's loud. Anything you want to make sure you get the coat out of the way. Trying to catch all of those bits underneath so we don't have any little holes in our pocket. That one I managed to clip upside down. Make sure that's something nice and flat. There we go. All right, let's see how wonky that looks considering oh, that's not so bad. Not so bad. That's our pocket. So let's lay this flat. All right, so here's the inside. You can see my pocket is on. Completely enclosed. And because it's satin, it's nice and flat. Now, I have not taken this off, but this will open. Let me pull this out real quick. I usually leave this stitched until it's completely done, but I'm going to pull it out for demonstration purposes. Okay, so here's the pocket. And there's the lining all on the inside. So when you put your hand in, your hand comes forward like that. That's how it looks on the inside. Isn't that pretty? Yes, I'm very pleased with that. So there's one done. I'm going to go ahead and work on this one. And we will be through with today's work. I need to give it a little bit of a press. I'm going to make sure when I press this that I'm going to put my, my little scrap of velvet on top, and I'm going to give it a haircut. There, you can see it on the camera. Yeah. There's the welt. I've taken the stitching out, and there's the pocket. So when I'm wearing this, your hand goes in like this, and you have a nice little pocket. And if it opens, you've got satin. That's what's going to be what you can see below. I use my pant pockets all the time, but I don't use these pockets on coats as much. I really just want it pretty. So that's the pocket, the welt pocket. We're completely done with all of that, and we're going to stop there for this week. Next week, we're just going to finish the whole coat. So we're going to put everything together, put in our lining, do our beautiful cuff. All of that will be in next week's video. Thanks for sewing with me, and I'll see you next week for part 3 of the Tasha coat. We'll finish it all up.